So, good afternoon from Vienna. My name is Angela Me. I'm the head of research at the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. And I want to welcome you wherever you are. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And I wanted to welcome you on the presentation of a book that speaks about an iconic National Statistical Office. Those of you that have been involved in national statistical systems at international level knows the reputation of INEGI. And so we will hear today about the history of INEGI, and we will hear about the presentation of the book, this book that hopefully many of you, if you haven't had the chance of looking at it, will have a chance to read it. And we will have, as a chair of this event, Giulio Santaelia, the president of INEGI. And then we will have Mario Palma, the authors of the book, and the custodian of the history of INEGI, since he lived it through much of the story that made INEGI such a great institution. And then we will have a great three panelists to discuss and to challenge also, the history and some of the issues that are covered in the book. And so we will have Herman Haberman, who is the former USA chief statistician and the former director of the United Nations Statistics Division, John Pullinger, who is the current president of International Association of Official Statisticians and the former UK Statistical Office Director. And then Misha Belkindas, the co-founder of Open Data Watch and former managers at the World Bank Development Data Group. So with this, I just wanted to say how pleased and honored I am to be moderating this event. For me, I have here two of my mentors, Mario and Herman, who have really been the mentors of my career. So thank you for the honor to moderate this event. With this, Giulio, the word is to you to open this event with some wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Angela. It's morning here in Aguascalientes, a rainy morning. Hello to all of you. I say hello to all our fellow colleagues from the international data community, mostly those coming from official statistics. I would like to start by quoting Suhail Doshi, who was chairman and co-founder at the Mixed Panel startup. Most of the world make decisions based on either guessing or using their gut. They will be either not. There's some echo.
John and Herman, maybe again muted. Maybe John, you may want to mute yourself. Okay, try again. Giulio.
Okay, sorry about that. So the quote goes again: most of the world will make decisions based on either guessing or using their gut. They will be either lucky or wrong. In this panel, in this session, I will not preach to the converted. you all know that decision-making at any level requires trustworthy and reliable information, whether you are in the public or the private sector, or even at the personal level. Our raison d'être is to support evidence-based decision-making with meaningful data. And in many cases, the role of information provider falls with the national statistical offices. I do not exaggerate by stating that credibility is an NSO's most important asset. This credibility must be slowly earned by meeting several conditions, one of which, and perhaps the most important, is professional independence. As the fundamental principles of official statistics, which are about to have an important anniversary, declare, the work carried out in official statistics must be done exclusively with technical criteria, not political ones. The information that is produced and disseminated must be detached from all interest groups with the sole purpose of describing, with the greatest possible precision, phenomena that characterize societies. But building and maintaining credible organizations is not easy. It requires the effort of many people for a long time, every day. In Mexico, the National Office of Statistics and Geography is INEGI, or as I very much like how Angela pronounced it, INEGI. In its almost 40 years of history, many people have worked every day to build, maintain, and enhance INEGI's credibility, to consolidate its professional independence, enshrined during the last decade in its autonomy at the constitutional level. And this is the story that Mario Palma tells us in his book, Why INEGI, the Saga of a Mexican Institution in the Search of Truth. This book is a testimony of multiple efforts that take to build an institution as important, as complex as INEGI. But when asking why INEGI, one must come to the question, why Mario? When Mario's term as vice president came to an end in December 2018, I did not want to lose all the institutional memory and the insights that Mario had with him, so I invited him to write the book. I cannot think of a more suitable person than Mario Palma for the task of writing this testimonial. He is simply the best possible author because he knows the ins and outs of our institution in such a great detail. The book, thus, is a story told from an insider, commenting not only on events related to projects and financial resources, but also on the human side and political implications. Mario worked at INEGI in several different periods of his career. He started from operational areas and climbed up until he became a founding member of our board of directors that was established with autonomy. By being all over the structure, Mario is a mastermind behind some of the areas that are still operational today. But more than that, by spending all this time as part of INEGI, Mario has witnessed the transformation of our institute, how its interaction with authorities and other players has evolved in a changing country, and as well as how INEGI's position in the international arena has consolidated. Mario has been boosting data production and usage, and of course, mostly on governance, on crime and crime statistics. He is definitely an important element in a world where data has become increasingly the center of all. And certainly, this webinar and the presentation of the book come at a perfect time in which all those involved must work harder to consolidate the role of national statistical offices at the center of decision-making based on evidence and in authoritative information generated under the most rigorous technical criteria. I am certain that the book, Why INEGI, contains many lessons that will be useful for the international statistical and geographical communities. The commentators in this panel will highlight these takeaways. We want this book to become a public good, just as official statistics are also a public good. So I am very pleased to be here and to be able to hear the testimony of Mario and later of the experts who will discuss these important issues. Thank you very much, and back to you, Angela.
Thank you, Julio. And so now, Mario, the word is to you. I think you have described in the book not only the history of an institution, but also people. And so there's no better person, as Julio said, who could tell the story of the institution also through its people. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Angela. Thank you very much, Julio. I do appreciate your words. And many thanks to all for accompanying us today. And I should say good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good evening, good late evening, and early morning. Some of our dear friends, there are 148 people attending. I must tell you, and we are also very glad about that. And some friends I see, Shigeru in Japan, Lisa in the Philippines, Gemma in Australia. Thank you very much. That's a good example of what this international community means. I will give you a general overview of the book. I will try not to get into the specific subjects, but I will try to give you the environment in which it was made. A few things have already been mentioned by Julio. When the original idea, and it is what it is in the book, it says the history of INEGI, to write the history of INEGI. It was Julio Santaella's idea, really, and we soon, because we discussed it together, started to find lots of questions, starting with why, followed by questions starting with how, and sometimes with who. And that's how it started development. And when you write the biography or the history of an institution, you have to answer these questions, and some are very fundamental, and you will see them through this conversation. And you also have to draw from other subjects, from other disciplines beyond statistics and geography. It's public administration, it's law, it's political science in this case, and even philosophy sometimes. And then you have to keep in mind the general public at large, which is also very important not to fall into the trap of the lingos. We know specialists are quite a happy lot when they discuss their own subjects in their own lingos, but they are normally unaware that the rest of the world hates them because of that. But that's what's part of the thing we had to do, to find a common literary language to speak to all the possible audience. The history of INEGI is structured around two fundamental questions and some more, and the answers given to them, and other questions and answers will follow after them. But these are the two main ones around which the book is structured. One is, why is it important to adequately measure the many components of reality? That's the first one. And the second one is why this information should be preserved from any other considerations other than those strictly professional. That's what is called independence, and Julio has said a few words already on that. The first question addresses the raison d'etre of these institutions. Why do they exist? And informs the quality of their work. The answers inform the quality of their work. The second one goes to a core requirement that means without it, without this quality, which is the independence, all the rest of their work loses all possible justification. And this is important. The trust of the people depends on that. Julio has mentioned it. Also the credibility, a word that also Angela has used. The events of the life of INEGI, I use them as a canvas to develop the answers to these questions and how the hows and whys that follow them. You will find in the narrative lots of pieces of history, not only of INEGI, but world history, and there is a continuity of the development through history of what I will call official statistics and official geography in the world. You will find lots of this, and I put a few anecdotes through the whole book to lighten the narrative. I won't tell you the anecdotes now, but I can tell you one that came after the book was published. The other day, a friend of mine, a journalist who is reading the book, called me and said, you know, I am quite amazed to find that I have been fighting censorship all my life. And until now, I discovered that censorship comes from census, and not only from the word census, but also from the office of the census. In Rome, in 443 before Jesus Christ, you can see that in the book, and you can see quite a lot of other things about the old censuses, not only of the Romans, and you may even find that the best census of antiquity was not done by the Romans or by anyone in the Bible, but by some barbarians that Julius Caesar found in Gaul when he was fighting his wars there. But I won't spoil your curiosity saying more about this. The chapters on INEGI's history proper, they tell the story of how, and this is the story, the whole story, how an institution that started life as a very modest agency in a developing country with no particular standing among the public or among the, and especially not among the public administration, with a very limited budget, developed into a completely different thing, which is the present INEGI, with a good budget, with lots of programs, and particularly a respected, prestigious institution that is considered, without doubt, the undisputed source of information in Mexico for statistics and geography. And also it's an autonomous institution. But this development is the interesting thing, I would say, about the history of INEGI and how it happened. It was a combination, and you will see that, of vision, of leadership, of hard work, of learning from mistakes, of training, of learning from peers, and that brought this situation after a few years. And it brought, with time, something interesting, more functions, even some which are not in the normal remit of statistical or geographic offices. INEGI at one point was asked to measure all the plot lands in the country, in the countryside in Mexico. And remember, this is a country of 2 million square kilometers. And it was done in 3-4 years. And maybe it's the biggest effort ever in the world of measuring such a quantity of land. And that was, INEGI was asked to do it. It was not a normal thing for a geographic office, or for a statistical office less, but we did it at the beginning of the 90s. A national development plan was written and coordinated from INEGI in 95 to that was the plan for 95-2000 for the whole country. And also the story, you will find also the story of the episodes of bad luck, and I like to stress that, because sometimes, and I even heard once a story that is not in the book, so I can tell you. A colleague from another statistical office in South America once told me, well, you are a much lucky institution because you have the resources to do whatever you want. Well, I told him on that occasion, look, the important thing is not to have the resources, it's how you get them. And to get them, you have to function, you have to work, you have to deliver information that is valuable for society, and you have to sell it. those two things, to have them, that's the end of the process. That's not so important. But some of the bad luck ones, the worst one, and I cannot think of a worse one, was the earthquake of 1985 that destroyed one of the buildings of INEGI, collapsed completely, with loss of lives, unfortunately, very sadly. And another building was so damaged that no one could enter it. And we had an economic census in 1986, and 3 more censuses coming in 1989, 90, and 91. If that is not bad luck, I would like to hear a better example. But how the institution recovered from that, and it was just a very young institution, only 2.5 years old when this happened, and there was a move to Aguascalientes, which is also a very important event in INEGI's history. We had to move our headquarters. There was no choice, because the city was so destroyed that there were no office space to rent or to buy. I mean, it was impossible. And there was no choice to move to another city. And that's a feat in itself, that the story It's narrated there, but it's a story of how bad luck could be converted into good luck. Well, you will also find a chapter on the process that ended with INEGI's legal autonomy, which is an interesting process in itself too. It took 16 years from the time it was formally, even if secretly, started, and you will see why in the book. And even though it really was discussed the first time before the foundation of INEGI in 1983, that anecdote is there, when Pedro Aspe visited Professor Malimbo in France. He was the director of the INSEE at the time, and they discussed this subject, which was unheard of in any statistical office at the time. And that's how the idea started, and it is there. What happened with this process? There was a lot of opposition. It was very difficult to get, and the story is there. It coincided with the process of democratization of the country, which is interesting also. And this process led to free elections, to real competition in the elections, and to the creation of several institutions. One was the Federal Institute for Federal National Electoral Institute, the central bank's independence, and INEGI becoming autonomous. And these three, with others, became in some way pillars of democracy in Mexico, and institutions that limit the power of the traditional, very strong power of the presidency in this country. And okay, well, that was also interesting, and you will find it there too. The last two chapters talk about the future. The chapter 10, which is the last one, talks about the challenges that this type of institutions face for the future, at least the ones we can see from now. There you will find what the normal perennial or maybe pedestrian ones, but funding. You will find how to attract talented people in a world of new technology for the future. But you will also find the big issues, and not only big data, but big data is there. But you will find some big issues, the technology development in general, that go to the core of the existence or the future existence or the role of these kind of institutions in the future. There is a discussion there. And then chapter 11, which is the last one before the corollary, it comes back to the subject of autonomy or the subject of independence in general. Why is this subject so important? And some people have criticized in the past INEGI for being like obsessed with the subject. There is a fact, and this is not theoretical. When you measure social, economic, demographic, even natural issues, you are really evaluating public policies, or you are evaluating the government's performances. And it's a fact of life that governments don't like to be measured, or at least they would prefer to carry the news themselves, or see how they are presented and when they are presented. That's the reason really for this fight for independence. I put a few stories that you may find interesting about what has happened in several countries of the world through times with when governments have tried to intervene against information. And this applies not only to statistics, also to geography. You will find a recent case there on geography. I was tempted to call this chapter the Gallery of Horrors from Stalin to Trump, but diplomatic considerations stopped me from doing it. But I was really tempted to do it. But the cases are there, and actually Herman was involved in the last one, and the story is there in some way, and Kathy Wallman, who is attending the meeting too. But that's there too. And I want to recommend that you enjoy it, but some of them are really sad. But they illustrate the variety of ways that governments can try to manage, I will put it inverted commas, the information. One last point that I would like to mention, and this was meant for the Mexican audience, but I have to tell you that this too. Through the book, it's implied, there is a message implied for Mexican society, which becomes very explicit towards the end of the book. And this message is that INEGI is an institution worth preserving because of the quality of its work and what it delivers to society, and also because and with its autonomy. That will be a fast summary of the book. I hope I didn't repeat too much, and I give the floor back to our moderator. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mario. Those of you who have worked with you or had the privilege or enjoy your friendship knows how much your stories are always part of the conversation. So it's so nice to hear from you all of these stories. And I was reflecting on the gallery of horrors that you mentioned. I think as a statistician, we all have our own gallery of horrors. And maybe, you know, we have all experienced it at least once. So sometimes I say, you know, we need to establish the statistician anonymous just to have a group, a supporting group. Anyway, so let's start the discussion with our panelists. And I invite all of you to, if you want to share a comment, a thought, or questions to the panelists. We welcome particularly the questions that may challenge the panelists. You have on your screen something like two kind of bubbles with question marks. If you go there, then you can have a question. And we already have Rolando from Santiago that sends his greetings, and then Gabriel from DC, from Washington, DC, who is the president of the Mexican Community on Public Management for Results. So, okay, so let's start our conversation. So first of all, I would like to ask our panelists, maybe starting with Herman, what is that surprised you from the book? You have been involved and you know INEGI for so long. Anything that surprised you?
Well, thank you, Angela. Let me first note that both the breadth and the depth of the book are incredibly impressive. And I want to congratulate Mario and INEGI for this book. I think it's a terrific exercise. Angela wanted to know what was surprising. I think when I looked at the book and started to read it, it was a word that surprised me. It was the word truth. Truth, at least here in the United States now, is a fairly emotional word. And I was surprised. Usually NSOs do not talk about truth. We talk about objectivity, reliability, trustworthy, and credibility is probably as close as we get to that word. And so I was going to say, gee, I'm not sure about using that word. And then I started to think about what's going on, not only here, but around the world, that many of our societies are facing an avalanche of lies. And in many respects, I think we are engaged, as you said, Mario, in a war about truth, actually. And so I'm nervous about the word. It surprised me. I use it with great caution, but I think I understand why you use that word truth. Angela?
Thank you, Herman. John?
Well, that's a very powerful start, Herman. Thank you. But I'd like to continue by echoing the thanks and congratulations to Maria and Julio and all the team who've been involved in this. It is a magnificent read, and a very good read, and good fun as well, Mario, which is excellent. So the thing that surprised me was the story of the creation of INEGI. And it surprised me because I hadn't heard it before. And for people who have the book, it's on page 80 of the book. And it begins with this. It says, the moment comes in 1982, in the months following the presidential election, in the midst of one of the biggest economic crises in Mexico's history. The experts are gathered to resolve whether or not the country is in an economic recession. The problem was But regardless of the criteria that could be used to reach a conclusion on whether or not Mexico found itself in a recession, there was no recent data on the country's GDP. And then it cuts forward 6 months to the day of the inauguration of the president, right at the beginning of his term. Mexico has decided to create a modern institution that will provide an information service in line with the country's needs. Very, very powerful and brilliantly expressed, Mario. Thank you. That surprised me and inspired me. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Misha, your surprise.
Yeah, my surprise was, I would echo both and Herman and John, but in addition to that, my surprise is that, Mario is paying attention to sometimes very small things, which are very important to the institution, which just go unnoticed. I mean, let's say when you read the book, you see, which is close to my heart, a small ad memoir written by two of my former colleagues of the World Bank, who, came to Mexico on the invitation of INEGI and looked at their national accounts and, quite rightly put a stamp of approval. And this was important for the institution at that time to get the stamp of approval. And second, is what the second is what, again, close to my heart, is an issue of data openness. Because particularly in the current times, with many more players coming to the field and many more lies going around, I think the openness is extremely important. And that the two things which I think are very important and which really surprised me that Mario and INEGI are paying attention to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Misha. So I'll come back to you, Misha, because as you know, with the World Bank, you have seen so many national statistical offices, so you know a lot about the evolution also of other national statistical office and system. So why do you think the INEGI experience is relevant beyond Mexico and outside of Mexico?
It's a very good question, Angela. And a very difficult question. I mean, firstly, I know that we will more and more speak today about independence, but I've seen many movements towards independence of a national statistical office, from the very developed statistical systems to the really statistical systems which face challenges. But it's very difficult to see this approach to independence. I mean, it's really not that you go and you create a parastatal which has a board and it's independent from the government, and then it goes into a problem with financing. INEGI and the government and the presidency of Mexico went all the way in amending the constitution. And I think this is the, that's what it's extremely important. It's extremely important, and I think that's that is one of the very important things which are which Mario gives a lot of attention in the book, and I think this is important in looking at worldwide issue of it. And I want at this point, before stopping, I think it's this example and a few other examples of Mexico would be very important to highlight in the current work which the UNSD is doing on revising and updating the book on statistical organization. And I think this is a really good place, a little bit more to publicize this extremely interesting and important work which INEGI has done so far.
Thank you. Thank you, Misha. I'll go, first of all, Mario, Enrique de Alba said how proud he was to be with you at as one of the board of governors, and then just to say that he's here with us discussing. And then there is a very interesting question from Walter Rademacher, but maybe I just want to close the first round, another question for Herman and John, and then we go back to Walter's question. So, John, the book describes an extraordinary evolution, as Mario mentioned, of the National Statistical Office. And what do you think was successful? I think Mario mentioned some success, but also challenges made it a success. And he mentioned also, he said, well, leadership was a key. And so from your side, how do you think is leadership indispensable, makes a difference? And also, I think INEGI is one of the also largest now statistical office. Does size matter?
Well, I think I'll answer with two parts. I mean, the first one is to echo what Misha has said, that the foundation stone is very solid. The foundation stone of independence in the Constitution gives a strong, strong base. But that can be a two-edged sword. I think sometimes if an institution has that level of strength, it can think it is independent from the world and therefore not need to interact. And you used the word evolution in your question. I think that is the key. And some people describe the theory of evolution as the survival of the fittest. That is not a correct understanding. Evolution is the survival of the most adaptable. And I think this is where INEGI has scored big time, and Mario shows it time and time again, that the leadership of the organization has been awake to the changes in the world around it, in the society, in the economy, in the politics, and has adapted itself to fit the moment. And I think that is true leadership. And I pay tribute to Mario for his role in that, in adapting the institution to this new world of the data revolution.
Thank you. And thank you, John. That's interesting. Yes, on the concept of evolution. Herman, to you, Mario mentioned that the autonomy or, the independence is the pillar of democracy, and has been one of the pillars of INEGI, to contribute to the democracy. And the fact that it's built into the institution, as we are saying, is unique in the world. But what does really autonomy means in this context? And do you really think that an institution can be completely autonomous?
One thing that's interesting, and Mario described very well, the long and winding road that went down in order to get to where they are. And I think one should not underestimate both the talent and the persistence that people had to do for a 16-year road, and you all need to be congratulated for that. One thing we might explore at some point is autonomy. The name autonomy seems to be more prevalent in Mexico than in other places. You have autonomous universities, and I think there is a cultural factor here at work which might be interesting. Clearly, the autonomy that you have done is of singular importance. But you also did it in a very thoughtful way. For example, you thought about building systems. In your building your autonomy in your constitution, you talked about building 3 systems of statistics and geography, not a siloed effort, but 3 systems. The way that you put together the board of directors. Frankly, I'm in awe of where you went with your budget. When I think about the complete lack of any budget authority I had in the United States and what you have in INEGI, it's breathtaking. But you also tend to do the good things by saying, okay, We will also try to isolate the board of directors from the people that do the actual work and prevent the kind of micromanagement and politicization of how people do price indices. Having said all those good things, let me just end on a couple of concerns. I draw a distinction between independence, and your autonomous thing tends to guarantee that independence and control. You talk about the fact that you are the people that produce the official statistics, that their use is mandatory by certain segments of the government. And you mention in your book that, and this is where I need help, I didn't perhaps understand very well, that INEGI had sought control over some of the bank operations in producing information, and that you thought when they lost that in the production of autonomy, that was in a sense an assault on INEGI's autonomy. I mentioned, and I build on John's point, when you get to have this kind of authorities, and it becomes really difficult to become a sharing organization. For example, as you become bigger and more powerful, how are you going to deal with other legitimate forms of data providers? And to John's point about adaptability, statistical offices become less and less able to control their environments. Even, I think, with the autonomy in your constitution, there are more actors now. There are more in the private sector and other places that produce information. How do you deal with the people that will also produce price indices? You may have that authority, but there will inevitably become these kinds of things. And I think that's the adaptable part as you grow into the future, is how do you change and deal with the fact that society ultimately will change? Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Herman. So I will go to Walter's question and comment. I think a very thoughtful comment. So I will read it because I think it's worth reflecting. So he say, freedom of expression is a farce if information about the facts is not guaranteed. Hannah Arendt already stated in the mid-1960s, factual information inspires thought and keeps speculation in check. This defines the role of statistics in politics, to serve as a language for public disclosure, to help improve decisions and to enable everyone to participate in these processes. What could have made us more aware of the importance of good statistics, if not the pandemic experiences of the recent past? Statistics are by nature political in a special way. They are the object of opinion without themselves being influenced by opinions and interests. How can statistics do justice to this difficult task of being factual information in the sense of Hannah Arendt, the one that was quoted earlier? How can, and that's, I think, the critical question, how can facts be policy relevant but not politically driven? So I said, I will maybe start, I'm sure each of you has a thought on this, also based on all of your experience. So is there anyone that particularly wants to start, or I call, I don't know, Mario, do you want to take your take on this question? You're muted. You have to unmute.
I think I found.
Yes.
Yeah, I think okay. I think it's correct. Thank you, thank you for the questions, and thank you, Walter, for your very good comments. And I will address Walter's and some of what Herman said. I agree with Walter there, and there is a lot in the book about that, the political role of statistics, and really, what do they have to do with democracy? Well, they allow the information for the players in a democracy. It's not only the government that has to get the information. And I think for the government, it's very important to have the information, but also for the critics of the government or for the opposition parties and everyone. That's the role in some way. It's the whole society, and includes the political players, the direct political players, get the information from a statistical office of many things, not of everything, of course, but the statistical and the geographic information. If the country is a disaster in economics, and the economy is not growing, and there is a lot of inflation and all that, well, this information has to be available to all the public, including the political players. That's what I would say. That's why it played an important part, the creation of INEGI as an independent institution in the democratization of the country in Mexico. Remember that for 70 or 80 years we had just one political party dominant, and elections were far from fair. No, that's what I would say to Walter's comments. Herman has several interesting points there, and I try to see if I can answer all of them, but let me try. The Bank of Mexico autonomy, and that's an interesting starting point, I would say, to your next question. It's what happened at the beginning. Well, actually, the bank was one of the players against the autonomy of INEGI at some point. See, and in the law there is something that they will have preference for certain kind of information, for the information related to prices and some other things. They do have some preference, and we have worked very fine with them on this one. But here there was a problem of conflict of interest for all institutions. It was not only the conflict of interest of having the Bank of Mexico and INEGI as part of the central government. Once the bank was independent, there was a conflict of interest in measuring the pricing, the inflation and all prices, because the bank was in charge of the policy of controlling prices, and this had to go into some institution which a different one, but it couldn't be back to the government, because that was why the bank became independent. But it had to go to other institution that was independent from both the bank and the government, and that's why it came to INEGI. It took some time, but I think it was a quite smooth and fair process, and after that the bank and INEGI have been working and cooperating together very finely. And Julio can tell you more on this. Your other point, Herman, is what will happen with other legitimate sources in the future, and what should be the role of INEGI. And well, first, and I think Julio is better prepared to answer these questions. But I would say just a few things. Well, the future of INEGI in relation to the other sources of information, legitimate sources, as you said, Herman, in this case, what should it be? Okay, how the role of INEGI is described even in the Constitution is not only as a producer of information, but as a coordinator of information. It doesn't mean that all the information has to be produced by INEGI, and lots of it come from other sources, and some can be sources also of conflict. As for instance, you have now, and this was mentioned by Walter too, the pandemic, the last pandemic we had. Well, one problem that I think all statistical offices had was the registries, the information on number of deaths, and if they were considered deaths because of the COVID or because of other sources. And that information, INEGI and other statistical agencies can only participate as in a coordination form, but they will be really elaborated originally, at least the source originally is from government, from the different, in the case of Mexico, the different state governments will produce the statistics on death certificates. And that is something that can be problematic because of technology, if they do not have it, to have it electronically and fast, which is the case in Mexico for many of them. And it can also be a problem in some countries when they are not registering properly. And that's also a problem to have there. And what will be the role of National Statistical Office? Well, in the case of Mexico, we have a very precise coordinating role. I'm not saying that we are going to overtake them or take the job from them. That will not be possible. But I understand that you may also be thinking of more advanced technology. What is going to happen? And that, well, I put something in the book about the big players, the international ones, the Facebooks and all these ones. What could happen? But I don't know what will exactly happen. My only suggestion, or from an old experience I had with the Convention for the Law of the Sea, which took about 15, 17 years to get the convention, it's better to start working at the United Nations level on this convention for the future management of information, which will be much more difficult than the Law of the Sea that looked difficult at the time, but it was not compared to this one. Among other things, because for the first time for an international convention, besides the countries, you will have some private players which are international and not easy to control, and they should be included in all this negotiation. But that's what I will say now. I hope Herman, I more or less try to address what you said, but maybe Julio has more to say about the future and the technological part. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mario. We have actually more questions, and actually you see the community, there is a question or comment from Jose Antonio Mejia, there is Stefan, there is Eduardo Sojo. So maybe we take and some of the others, and then we go back also on this politically relevant. And okay, Jose Antonio, great book. Congratulations to Mario and greetings to all the panelists. Will it be possible to extract clear lessons learned that other national statistical office could implement? So maybe can I ask maybe Herman to comment? I mean, going back also to what Walter mentioned, how to strike the balance between being into understanding what is relevant politically, but at the same time keep the distance. And not to be politically driven. And so in that sense, has INEGI given some lessons, have been able to find the right balance that can help also other national statistical office?
I guess echoing John, I think I'd like to answer by reading Mario's words. First, I disagree a little bit with Walter. I think much of the data, as Mario said, is politically driven. Statistical offices don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in order to provide data to society. And clearly there have to be the legitimate parts of society which need this data. Now, how do you balance? I would go back to page 444 in Mario's book. And he was talking about, how do you deal with some of these problems? And he said, however, the most important barrier to containment will always be the concerned action that society as a whole may present to any attempt either to manipulate information or to compromise the independence of statistical and geographical offices. Here, the role of public opinion, political parties, civil society, and the media in defending the collective right to information becomes crucial for its preservation. And I think that was well said by Mario, and I would just echo it.
Thank you. Thank you, Herman. So, okay, I'll go back. This is, I see it as an anonymous, but then Eduardo Sojo later said, I'm sorry, so I think this is Eduardo's word. So I will read, but I'm not sure, I'm not completely sure. A big applause to Mario for this very interesting biography of an institution that is mixed with biography of persons. Biography are generally written when people have died or at the end of their careers. So in a way, this is a book of people that are still alive. That's a very good point. This is not the case of INEGI. What will be your recommendation for INEGI to continue being relevant in the future? So can I maybe ask, because then we have all around, and Julio, tell me if you wanted to be part of a mix to, I know we're waiting for your final remarks to all of this, but let me know if you also wanted to contribute to this discussion. So maybe I ask John to comment on Eduardo's words.
Okay, well, Eduardo, you are like me at the beginning of your career and just thinking about the future. So it's good to be making common cause with you again. But I guess my first answer to the question is this issue of adaptability, to always be alive to how to change for the future. And I think the adaptability required now is something that Mario brings out at the end of his book. So at the beginning of my career, the thing that was scarce in the world was data. So the National Statistics Office's focus was on collecting data because no one else was doing it, and we couldn't inform decisions without it. Now the reverse is true. There is data everywhere. And Mario uses this phrase, the idea of the Statistical Office as the guardian of a data system. And I like that phrase. And some other countries are calling it the data steward. But it is the idea of kind of taking responsibility for a healthy system. So it's not being a monopoly in collecting data, but it's making sure that lies are called out and truth is discovered and brought together and taken to the table where decisions are made. So I think this idea of guardianship is the idea for now. But in 10 years, who knows? INEGI will have to adapt again.
Indeed, thank you, John. And it's very true that if 20 years ago it was an issue of producing data, today is leading on data, which is not just managing data and to navigate on the amount of information and data that we have around. There is also an interesting question from Jim Lynch. And so then maybe I will ask Misha and Julio if you want to comment on that or anything that other questions. The independence of INEGI is built in part on a reputation for quality statistics. Do you think that the consensus on what constitutes quality has diminished? If so, how do you maintain the perception of a high quality of INEGI statistics? Misha, do you want to give the first and then Julio?
Yeah, let me just give a try. I mean, this is a great question. And particularly, it's a great question in the changing environment. I mean, you know, John and Herman just spoke about the changing environment, and I think as everything in the world currently is changing very fast, and so the whole notion of a statistical system is changing fast. And you know, in Mario's book. It's a great read for somebody who wants to understand how the statistical systems have changed from the censuses of Romans to today. But I am not sure that with this whole road from the history to today, we can very well predict tomorrow, because the change of a statistical system is not in a vacuum. It's, you know, it's in the political system, it's in the IT system, it's in the, as Mario just mentioned, the new brothers like Facebook and Google's and others. So we really, you know, are facing a big challenge, and that brings us to the issue of quality. Because, you know, in a changing system, you know, quality becomes much more important. You know, if you go back like, you know, 10, 15 years, you had information coming out from NSO, and you had information coming out from administrative data sources. And these sources not always agreed. And today, you have many sources which do not agree, and you will have even more sources who will not agree. And the question of quality, and I would bring together the reliability, it becomes extremely important. I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thank you, Misha. Julia, over to you. I think you heard a lot. I mean, if you want to comment on this quality And I know I heard Jim also in another occasion, to speak about, the quality, particularly when we talk about new sources of data. How do we measure the quality on this new sources, but also on geospatial information system. I think, you shift a bit the quality parameters. So, Julio, your view.
Thank you, Angela. Great questions. I'd like to build on John's comment about the adaptability and relate that to quality. Quality is a multidimensional concept. I mean, quality encompasses many different attributes of information that we want to have. In the end, we want to be the data, the statistics to be trustworthy and reliable. But the perception or the value that users give to the statistics changes in different contexts. And the pandemic is a very, very good example of these things. There's usually a trade-off between timeliness and precision of the data. And my impression is that during the pandemic, there was a balanced shift towards more timeliness, perhaps with a somewhat possible sacrifice or trade-off within the precision, the statistical precision of some of the data that we're providing. And users were fine with that. I mean, if we could be able to provide them very timely data on excessive deaths or on unemployment or the vaccination, that would be fine to a certain degree that the precision is not out of any reasonable limits. So in that regard, we adapted to the new conditions and were able to make an effort to produce more timely statistics with alternative sources, such as nowcasting of economic activity, that definitely do not have the same precision as the traditional measurements of GDP and the like. Thank you.
Thank you, Julio. Now, Christoph Huber just sent congratulations and say just impressive story of an institution and the leadership it has managed. Now, Stefan, so I read, congratulations, Mario, congratulations, INEGI. This is an amazing book, a blueprint for the world of statistics, geography and data. It will and should resonate around the globe. In the 32 years I have had the privilege and pleasure of working with the INEGI, what I was always most impressed with is the people. The professionalism, the dedication, the word openness, the ethics they are carrying in their minds and their heart are inspiring. The professional corps, the spirit, is perhaps the best safeguard for independence and quality in the future. So basically what Stephanie said, people matter. People makes a difference. Any of you wants to comment on that? Mario, your turn to comment. It does really people makes the difference, has made the difference.
Maybe I'm not the most indicated one to talk on this one, but what I would say is, and I said it before, it was a combination of many things. It was a combination of vision, definitely. It was a combination of leadership by several people, and that continued through time, which is very important. And that there is a certain spirit or spirit de corps, they call it in the armies. It's in INEGI there is a tradition for some of the things that are written here. I'm not saying that all people have done it. There have been some exceptions, unfortunately, but most people will follow them. And there is a conception of civil service there, of statistics as an independent product that has not to be involved in other considerations. When people ask me about the effectiveness of autonomy, and Herman had some very interesting words about the difference between independence and autonomy. And I think we had to go into autonomy in Mexico for the institute for among other things we did have independence at the beginning. It was a parastatal, as Misha mentioned at the beginning, and it was legally an institution that, while hierarchically under under a ministry, was independent, technically speaking, which was not true. I mean, it was something you had to defend. We made it true, but it was not true, and there were several attempts, and at least one successful one against that independence. You, in Mexico, to go into real independence, in government, you have to go into autonomy. That's one point, and that came from experience. The other thing is, autonomy, of course, is not the panacea. It will not solve all your problems, but surely it helps. I can tell you that. No system is perfect, but it surely helps. And there have been quite a few examples, and at least people know that there is a difference. But of course, in the end, it's society which will have to defend a case of autonomy, as Herman also mentioned before. And that's another point. What about the people? Well, one thing has happened which is different to the rest of Mexican institutions. There has been a relative stability in the kind of people who are working at INEGI. And there is a lot of technical expertise that comes originally, and they improve it with training and with experience and all that. But in that sense, it's not a typical institution in Mexico. Why? Because you really, to carry out a survey or a census, you need qualified people. I mean, and normally these qualified people will remain in the institution for some years. And that helps to create also this spirit that I was saying, internal and a professional, a tradition of professionalization. That's also present. Coming back to the subject of autonomy, when people ask me, well, are you sure that in the future no president of INEGI will be tempted to not do the things properly? I said, well, the biggest defense is the whole operational team. You know, each survey, each census is carried out by sometimes thousands of people, sometimes hundreds of people. And these people come from all backgrounds, from all political backgrounds, but they are the guarantee that this will be a professional work, because they will be the first ones to know that something is wrong. and there will be whistleblowers, be sure of that. And that's maybe the last guarantee that we have inside the institution. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mario. So we have a question. So I'll take these two questions. So maybe the one is on again on independence, and then I'll ask Herman to comment and to what is the proper, precise, and detailed meaning of independence nowadays? Does it become more complex and demanding? And then there is another question from Martin Duran, and maybe John, so that you prepare to address it. I very much look forward to reading your book, Mario. Your and Julian's introductory remarks certainly whet my appetite. When we carried out the peer review of INEGI as part of the OECD recommendation on good statistical practice, we concluded that while INEGI satisfied well all the items included in the recommendation, however, the relationship with the many other agencies, ministries that produce statistics in Mexico is complex, and the coordination role of INEGI could be strengthened. The last WDR, so I think, Martin, for me, WDR means World Drug Report that we released last week, but I think Martin is the World Development Report of the World Bank that was dedicated to data this year, calls for the creation of an integrated national data system, which also include private actors. So some of you have mentioned already, you know, the idea that today there are many more actors. What are your views on this? And what should be the role for INEGI or the National Statistical Office, John? So Herman, back to you on, so does independence today mean something different from when INEGI was established?
Well, let me go back to nobody, if you're part of the government, is completely independent, and nor should one be. It's a public institution. And in fact, in that sense, I did have a question for Mario. It just reminded me. Who actually is INEGI accountable to? You say that you can go, any branch of Congress can call you in for questions, and there is some audit agency that produces a report, but it's not clear the level of accountability that INEGI has. And I think this is part of where we're talking about. Independence, you want to have a broad, open look at who, I'm not saying you don't, but you want to have that broad, open look at everything that one does, the technical things. As you point out in your book, Mario, independence is really professional independence. As it says in the fundamental principles, that an agency does its work based on professional principles without, I'll call it, political manipulation. There is going to be political association. It's part of the government. And you have developed a network of ways in order to get both local, I'll call them state, other private people to get together so that you get the inputs there. So independence is not complete. You have enormous independence in your budget, but still the Congress has to approve your budget. You may have certain freedoms in how you can use that money and other people don't, but nevertheless, you are part of the government and you have those restrictions, as you should, I think, as a public institution.
Thank you. Julio and I were in a panel recently organized by the World Bank World Development Report, and you remember there was a question of somebody said, well, shouldn't be an independent institution that watch the National Statistical Office and that, you remember, I thought it was a great question, and say that can actually, assess that kind of independence and professional independence. Anyway, so John, before I ask you to answer that question, maybe so that Misha prepare for the next question, and then I will read you the greetings from Cutting Woman. There is a question from Richard Ragnarsson. Sorry for the pronunciation. Thank you for an impressive book. We often say that official statistics are essential for evidence-based policymaking, but is policymaking and formulation and assessment actually fact-based? How to ensure not only that official statistics comply with quality and codes of conduct, professional independence, etc., but are actually used by especially politicians. I think this is an aspect that we have not discussed. I think so far we have discussed, from a statistician side, how do you ensure quality, independence, etc. But how do actually all of these efforts? How do you make sure that all of this is actually used for policy making? So, Misha, while you think so, John, back to you on the question. Back to you, John, on the question of lost monopoly and how, a statistical office interacts with other institutions.
All right, well, I'll come to that, but first I want to follow up on Herman's point about accountability and regulation. So the UK, I think, is unique in being the only country where there is an Office for Statistics Regulation that does actually monitor the standards of production of statistics, not just in the NSO, but also in the administrative part. And it goes more than that. It actually regulates the use of statistics in public life. So if senior politicians are misusing statistics, they will make that known and criticise, even up to the most senior politicians in the country. So there is something in that model that I think was very interesting for me as the chief statistician to kind of work within that structure. But on Martine's question, there is a very important parallel, I think, between Mexico and the UK, in that our NSO is headquartered many, many kilometres outside the capital city. And that has a great strength in terms of creating a very strong spirit, as Mario called it. But it has the risk that you become detached from the business of politics, which is always happening in the capital city itself. And peer reviews of the UK have said the same thing. But I think that the response has to be for the NSO to take the responsibility for the whole of the NSS. And an NSS, by definition, is a structure built on relationships, and to have great relationships with the ministries, with the President's office, with the private sector agents who may be involved in data collection or data supply in some ways, and be responsible. And again, I use the word from Mario's book of being the guardian of the whole thing, to make sure each of the bits of the system are working well together. And I think as Mexico takes up that challenge through INEGI, then the next peer review the OECD does will find Mexico to be an example of really good practice that the rest of the world can follow.
Thank you, John. So let me read you Catherine Goldman greetings, and then Misha, your question on actually using the statistics. Greetings, dear colleagues and friends. It is so wonderful to be in conversation with you. I continue to cherish and learn from you. Special thanks to Mario for bringing us together on the occasion of telling us a grand story. Indeed, I think I feel like we are all family. It would be great to be all in the same room. We have all of these friends and colleagues. So, Misha, your.
Thank you very much. It's an extremely good question, and it's a question as you know, as probably old as statistics are. You know, how do you achieve that people use your data and use it rightly for a certain purpose? And it's not only you have to worry about the government. I mean, statistics is a public good. And so, you know, you want that your data would be used for decisions done by a private individual. You know, do you buy milk today or you buy it tomorrow when the inflation kicks in and prices go up? Do I sell my house today or I wait, you know, until the interest rates will go up or down? So you know, you should worry about all your customers, including the policymakers, and this is the most you know, most difficult thing. You know, how do you achieve that the policymakers in the country are using your data, first, that they are using your data, that they don't do policy out of thin air only because they think they're clever and they can do that. And secondly, that they use it, the data they have, they use it rightly. And this is a lot of work, which usually a NSO, including INEGI, has to do. And you know, I mean, you have all kind of different methods and techniques of doing it, and I'm saying it because I am the only non-statistician in the whole on the panel and probably in the audience. So you know, I'm a data user from you know, since I was in probably the kindergarten, right? So to achieve that your data would be used and would be used rightly, you have also to do some additional things. First, I mean, if I would, if I like that the politicians, the policymakers would use my data, I have to explain also what is happening if you do this and this and this wrong. I mean, it's not enough to say, you know, the country is growing, the GDP is growing, and because of that, you can, you know, start building schools. Because, you know, the economy is growing, people are becoming richer, and you want the better future for your kids have to be educated. Then you have to, in addition, you have to explain that, you know, you have to have kids. So you have to show the demographic situation. And the third, you have to have roads. You have to be sure that your kids can get to the school, and so on and so forth. So if you are able to create these all narratives, working not only as an NSO, but working with the journalists and with the wider society. I think you help first to push your data into policy making, but second, you help the policy makers to make the right decisions.
Thank you, Misha. I think, yeah, indeed, you point to some of the things that I think many statisticians are reflecting. You know, is a role of statistical office to do actually the analysis, not just describing what is going up or down, etc., but actually to analyze phenomenon. And you know, how do you manage that? Again, keeping the independence, the issue of storytelling, the issue. So I think there is a lot around there. So we have less than 10 minutes left. So, okay, John has disappeared. I don't know what happened, but can I ask the last words from each? And I will take will trigger by Lydia. There is a comment from Lydia Bratanova. And so to ask you your last word, and then maybe we do the reverse. Herman, okay, John, if he's around, Misha, Mario, and Julio. So Lydia say, dear Mario and Julio, thank you for including me in this interesting discussion. I agree, people make the difference. Thanks for sending me the book. The issues around the value of official statistics are very dear to me. It is also a pleasure to listen to the wisdom of Herman, John, and Misha. You're not pleased to hear me? Okay, joke. Yeah, you mentioned everyone. Then next year, we will celebrate 30 years of the fundamental principles. On the occasion, turning to defining the core values that the new environment wants. So if I can take this and to ask you, so if I were to review the fundamental principle of official statistics, what would you think we should change, include, or delete? And can I also bring, there was one topic that we had in the list of the panel discussion, but because of the many interesting questions we didn't go through, that I think is the integration between statistics and geospatial information system. And that is more and more that INEGI embraced it when nobody was talking about it. But now I think, you know, this is becoming really the issue, and how statistics probably will become geospatial information system, or, you know, how will also change statistics. So if you can also maybe touch a little bit upon, but also if you want just to say, if you had to change the fundamental principle, also in light of geospatial information system, what would you change? So Herman, okay, I hope John comes back. Meanwhile, Herman, your last words. You're muted. You have to unmute.
I think the fundamental principles have stood the test of time reasonably well, actually. I think the issue is both that Julio and Mario have brought up. One, how are we to deal with the increasing pressures of both spatial and time, which statistical offices are reeling from? And how do we do that in view of the fact that we now have increasing numbers of alternative providers who will step in if the office is not able to stick with its usual standards of what it wants to do? I think that's a big question. And the other is Mario's point. What we've seen in your last chapter, Mario, is increasingly around the world where societies have not stepped in to defend the NSO, at least initially. And that we have not had, I don't think the fundamental principles are going to help us much there. If societies will not do that, then I think we're in real trouble. Your words are important, and so that's where I would stop.
Misha.
Yeah, I think fundamental principles, you know, stood out, and it served us all well, and it will. And I'm a very conservative person, and I would not run around and try to change it. I think we need to discuss it and to keep discussing it and to see, how it works in the changing environment. In technical and institutional and bringing in the geospatial systems and so on and so forth. But you know, just for conclusion, I mean, this is a fascinating book, and it's very well written, and I assume that I already said many times congratulations, but I want to say it again. But I just want to say that you know, I don't know how much it will help for the future of the national statistical system, the international systems. So we need to keep working and predicting what will happen and how to face the challenges and how to do the best out of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Misha. I don't see John, so Mario.
I thought John was trying to come back, but he was on the waiting room. I think he's coming, yeah. But anyway, in respect to the fundamental principles, well, the old rule that don't change what is working properly. I mean, don't try to repair the engine that it's working. I would say so. I agree with Herman. They have stood the passing of time quite well. You may remember that when the last revision, the only thing that was added actually was the part of independence, of the legal side of it, and it was not, it didn't come into the articles, it was put in the preamble. That part that they should be ensured at the highest possible level of the legal system, the independence, or something like that. It was written. It is written there, and I think that's a good point, because these principles apply to all countries, and not all of them will, not in all of them will be viable to try to think of an autonomous legal institution in the constitution and that sort of thing. That maybe at INEGI in Mexico we were lucky about it, but. I would say that's the main point. Maybe we have to consider something about the future role of national statistical offices, but I don't know yet what it could be. But maybe that there we have to add something. But we have to think about it, and I don't think the international community is prepared to have something that there will be agreement among us, all of us, on that. But that's the only place I would explore something more. As it is my last chance to speak, I just want to thank all the panelists. I want to thank Julio for the great idea. It was not my idea, but it was one that I really enjoyed since I heard it. And also I want to thank ISI and IOS for helping promoting the book and this webinar. Thank you very much indeed, and to all the people who are here today. That's really a super response that I appreciate very much. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mario. So, Julio, up to you to close. Then I want to leave you with a thought.
Thank you, Angela. There are not many things to add here. This has been a very rich discussion. We have many things to continue thinking about, perhaps about the future. I mean, these are the fundamental principles, for instance, for official statistics. But do we need something for data stewardship? Do we need something for geospatial integration? Should that be within the fundamental principles for official statistics, or should be completely different type of agreement? So those are big questions. Now, regarding INEGI, I will just conclude that we have to keep up with the expectations that society has upon us, continue to delivering trustworthy and reliable information, to be user-centric, and to maintain our credibility. Those are the things in a nutshell, but that requires a lot of work. Thank you very much, Angela.
Thank you, Julio. So I also wanted to leave you, taking from where you said, Julio, and going beyond the fundamental principle of official statistics to look at the data agenda more broadly. We as a group of international statisticians, we have launched the idea of having an international convention on data. So basically taking the idea of a fundamental principle at a much, much higher level, where you would have really that agreement among states on a set of principles, and only among those states that you would have data, sharing of data, etc. So I don't have the time to elaborate, but that's definitely the good challenge and the thought, could take to us to take the fundamental principle at much, much higher level and to a broader audience. So with that, I close our conversation. Really thank you all, and all that intervene with the questions, with the comments, and thank you. I wish, we were now all, as I said, in the same room, and now we open a bottle of Prosecco and we all cheer, and because we are all part of the same community. So again, Mario, thank you. Thank you for your fantastic work, and thank you, Julio, for hosting it. Hopefully we'll see you soon all in person. Bye. Bye-bye.